Mike Graham, the two Mikes.
Yeah.
You guys were a massive hit.
Yeah.
And then you fell out and haven't spoken again.
Simply, Mike decided he didn't want to be a part of the two Mikes again. He's never told anybody, including me, why he decided to stop, but he just stopped and that was it.
Immigration, one of the most divisive issues in Britain at the moment.
I think we let far too many people into this country. The whole thinking process has got to be changed.
What do you think is the biggest problem in Britain today?
The biggest problem, in my view, to come would be if...
Welcome to Daily Expresso. I'm JJ Anisiobi and this is the magnanimous Mike Parry.
That's very kind.
Mike, thanks for coming in. I'm going to go to the first question that most people who watch you on TV, and I see the comments people ask me about your relationship with this guy all the time.
Yeah.
Mike Graham, the two Mikes.
Yeah.
You guys were a massive hit.
Yeah.
And then you fell out and haven't spoken again.
Yeah, look, I've known Mike for over 35 years. We first started working together in New York in the mid-80s. We were the two youngest correspondents there. I worked for the Daily Express, this fine newspaper, and Mike was a freelancer building a good business there. And then Mike eventually came back to England. I think he wanted his children educated in this country, right? We worked together on the Express again. I was the news editor, actually, of the Express for 5 years, and I helped bring Mike in because he was a talented journalist. And our relationship developed into us working together then in radio and then in live shows. We did theatre tours of this country, 3 or 4 years. We also had a sellout show in New York next to Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
And it was all going very well, very successful. And, you know, I don't know. You look at some of the world's greatest pop groups, and I wouldn't put us in that category. But Pink Floyd, for instance, you know, and Black Sabbath, they split up, and never talked to each other again for 20 years. I mean, look at the most recent one, Oasis, okay, you know, and that sort of thing. And simply, Mike decided he didn't want to be a part of the two Mikes again, which is entirely his decision. You know, we'd had a fantastic run, very popular. Record figures on our podcasts, sell-out shows, but Mike didn't want to do it anymore, and that's entirely up to him. He's never told anybody, including me, why he decided to stop, but he just stopped, and that was it.
Okay. You've also worked with Alan Brazile.
Yep.
He's a big character. What's he like?
Al's a huge character. Some people say of a person, you know, when that guy walks in, he lights up the room. Alan Brazile could light up a cathedral, right? Okay. Alan Brazile is the most amazing, gregarious, intelligent, interesting man I've ever worked with. I've worked with Al probably 25 years. We started the TalkSport breakfast show together from nothing. I mean, literally, we didn't have an audience. Because what happened was the company that bought Talk Radio decided then to change it to TalkSport. Very clever move, okay, involving some very clever people. But I was in on that from the ground. We changed it to TalkSport. What we desperately needed was a fantastic breakfast show to get it off the ground. And so we tried getting big names in. Do you remember John McCririck, the betting
racing
punter?
Dude, yeah.
Other names from the world of racing and the world of football, and nothing was working. Nothing was going there. I brought Al in to do a couple of evening shows, and I realised what a vivacious character he was. So I said to him one day, listen, Al, I want you to help me out next week. He said, who's that Porky? He always called me Porky from day one, you know.
Porky?
Yeah, he branded me Porky, and I've been paying for that ever since. That's nice, isn't it, eh? Yeah.
Just to be clear, is it Porky because of your appearance?
Well, in those days, I was about 5 stone heavier. It was before my heart collapsed.
Oh, wow.
So I was a sizable bit of meat, you know what I mean?
Were you as big as Alan Brazile was?
No, nobody's ever as big as Alan Brazile. But nevertheless, the point of my story is, I said, Al, I want you to do some breakfast shows for me. And he said, I remember this to this day, it was 25 years on, and I'll tell you about some of the problems we had in between. He said, oh, Porky, I'm not very good at getting up. Well, believe me, that was proven many times over the subsequent years. But nevertheless, I mean, his character, his effervescence, his sense of humour, his inside knowledge in football and all that meant that the figures went from nothing to about 2.3 million within about 18 months, you know.
Wow.
And I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I couldn't find anybody to work with Al. So everybody who came in under I paid him, I said, no, look, I want you to do it like this. So I sat in for an hour and did it. And then it didn't work. Then somebody else said, I want you to do it like that. Eventually, we came to the decision that what best worked and what the audience both best liked was me working with Al. So I said, well, give it a try. So anyway, we ended up doing a 4-hour breakfast show 6 days a week. From 6 till 10. We did Monday through Saturday. We did that for 5 years. And that was hard work, especially with Al, because Al is the one thing Al has no inclination of at all is self-discipline. Not at all, okay? And he's gregarious and he's outgoing and he's terribly funny and amusing and a terrific guy to work with. And how he's lasted 25 years, I have absolutely no idea. Because sometimes people say, oh, well, you know, he lived his life to the full. Al has lived his life very, very, very much to the full. And he's still going strong.
What's the most chaotic moment you've ever had live on air?
With Al?
Just in general.
Well, two different views on this. I was in the office on the day of the 9/11 strike in New York.
Right.
Because I'd worked in New York for the Daily Express, funnily enough, and at other times, I knew the geography of Manhattan. So I went in and I did 7.5 hours that day. Just being able to explain the pictures to our radio listeners, the towers coming down, you know, the area of Manhattan where they were fallen, how people were coming down, you know, FDR, the East River Drive, how they were escaping from Manhattan, what I thought would be happening, you know, in the fire engines and all that kind of stuff. So that was monumental, absolutely monumental. But probably the most chaotic had to be when Al never came back from Cheltenham, because Cheltenham was a regular and we used to love it. And we used to get paid for drinking the first pint of Guinness in the Guinness tent each morning. You see what I mean? A pint with, you know, Mike Parry and Alan Brazile. And the problem was, in those days, the Gold Cup was run on a Thursday afternoon, but we had to do a show back in London on Friday morning, you know, to finish the week. And I said, come on, we're going home on Thursday. We're not staying for the Gold Cup. He said, I'm staying for the Gold Cup. I said, no, don't stay for the Gold Cup. It'll be a terrible nuisance getting home this evening, won't it, after the Gold Cup? We'll go now while it's quiet. Anyway, he wouldn't come, so he stayed. I said, I'll see you tomorrow. Anyway, it's legendary now that I'm afraid he never made it back. On that day, we had Ken Bates, the legendary chairman of Chelsea Football Club, in the studio. And Ken's not a man to mess around with, you know. So I'm sitting there, and Ken's there, and what's going on here? Where's that bastard Brazil? I don't waste my bloody time, you know, sitting around in radio studios. Who does Alan Brazil think he is? I said, he'll be here any minute, Ken. I was waiting for Al to turn up, you know, like in the Batmobile outside, screech tire. No chance. He was still asleep in a hotel in Gloucestershire somewhere, where he'd finished up the night before. So Ken, and it was nightmarish, you know. Ken Bates getting on my back and trying to make the show work, and eventually it was so chaotic that we patched a show together and all that, and we got record numbers. And also, I remember distinctly, the Daily Express splashed on something Ken Bates said in that show on their back page the following morning. You know, there was lots of stories that came out, always would do with Ken Bates. But it led to Al leaving the station. Well, Kelvin Mackenzie was running the place at the time, okay? And he was so incensed, he said he's got to go. And he actually biked a letter out to Al's place in Suffolk. Al lives in a lovely converted barn in Suffolk, you know. But then the problem was the audience disappeared. About half of the breakfast audience disappeared.
Wow.
And it was like an old Second World War film, wasn't it? You know, bring so-and-so to me, I'm going to punish him. Oh, we can't. Why not? We shot him yesterday. And it was like that, you know, with you know, the boss coming in saying, why did you get rid of Brazil? I said, well, no, actually, it wasn't me. Why did you get rid of Brazil? Get him back. So I'm then in the position of having to find Al in a wine bar somewhere in London. But Al is a very clever man. And you'd have thought somebody who'd lost a very lucrative job, very popular job, and suddenly I meet him, Al, great news for you. What's up, Borky? What's that you're going to tell me? I said, I'm going to take you back. Oh, you're going to take me back, are you? I said, yeah. He said, oh, you think so? I said, yeah. He said, and how much more money are you going to pay me to come back? It was amazing. Most men would have fallen on the ground. Oh, thank you. No, not Al. Anyway, he came back and the rest is history.
Right, move on to something more serious now. Immigration.
Yes.
One of the most divisive issues in Britain at the moment.
Yes.
Where do you think the debate is going wrong in this country on that?
Well, is the debate going wrong? I mean, if it's a debate, they're one side and the other. I'll tell you what I think is wrong with immigration. I think we let far too many people into this country and it costs us an awful lot of money. The welfare budget alone in this country is, as you know, 333 billion, rising to 400 billion at the end of the decade. A lot of that is pensions, but that brings in the triple lock argument, obviously. But what I'm worried about is that the pull factors and all the signs around the world that if you come to Britain, you do get a four-star hotel bedroom. You do get the ability to use the National Health Service. You will be helped financially to some extent or whatever. You will even maybe qualify for a phone. And all these pull factors, even Mr. Macron, who runs France, actually said to us, you've got too many pull factors. That's why people come to your country. Yeah. Look, the French don't want them to stay in France, so they're happy to wave them off across the water. That I understand that completely. But if we didn't have all those pull factors, I don't think they'd come. And frankly, I'm worried that we've become the welfare basket case of the world. People don't just come through Europe, they come from all over the world. I mean, obviously there are legal channels and there are illegal channels. And clearly, it all went wrong with the legal channels. The Boris wave was, in my view, disgraceful. I mean, I'm probably least supportive of Boris Johnson than anybody. I thought he did some terrible things which have resulted in modern-day problems in our country. Very charismatic, but didn't have the slightest interest, did he, in running the detail of government? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Don't worry about that, and all that kind of stuff. So, really, to answer the question, I think we've got to put more barriers in the way of people coming. We've got to make it less attractive to come here. And when people come here, there's got to be a very strong and short period of time before we decide whether they can stay or not. Because, frankly, societally and culturally we're changing. The little story last week about Laleham. Laleham is a little village in Surrey, stockbroker belt, near where I live. And it's quintessential Middle England. And when a group of young men, some of whom don't speak English, are suddenly put into an HMO, House of Multiple Occupation, in a very nice house in Laleham, I mean, alarm bells ring all over the place, particularly if it's a few hundred yards from a school. And I'm worried that this is going to be a repetitive feature, because it's all very well the government saying, oh, don't worry, we've closed down 11 hotels. There's 200 hotels. They've closed down 11. You have to say, well, where are the people going? They say, oh, they'll go to old army camps, but they won't. They're being put in HMOs in very specific locations in order to spread them out. I come from Chester in Cheshire, and there's a town in Cheshire called Altrincham. Yeah. And I've stayed in Altrincham many times because it's just down the road from Old Trafford. And when I've been up to see my team Everton playing at Old Trafford, I'd always stay at the hotel in the middle of Altrincham. But I can't now, because it's a hotel which houses illegal immigrants. There's a lovely little village called Datchet near Old Windsor, near where Elton John lives, okay? And again, I used to know friends who lived there, and I've been to a wedding in the hotel on the green at Datchet, which is now full of illegal immigrants, or was. I think it might have been empty now, but it certainly was for a period of time. And what worries me is changing the whole look and the whole face and the whole nature of British society. That's what worries me. I want people to integrate. I believe in diversity, but diversity isn't plonking people somewhere where they have no association with the rest of the population. I mean, listen, I'm old enough to remember, and you will have heard of this, JJ, when you grew up in a town in England in the 60s, If a black family moved into your street, you moved out. It was called white flight. People were worried the value of the property would go down. It was a terrible thing. But that's the way it started, and that's why there are towns in the northwest of England and in Leicester which have been completely now absorbed by people who've come from overseas to live there. And that's not integration to me. That is a completely different issue, you know?
Yeah. Do you think politicians are being honest with people?
No, of course they're not.
No?
Of course they're not. No politicians are being honest. And by the way, if people think I'm a Tory, let me tell you, I think that David Cameron, starting with John Major, then David Cameron, and then Boris Johnson and Theresa May have done as much damage to this country as anything I can accuse Labour Prime Ministers of having done. Because I am unashamedly an out-and-out Thatcherite, okay? I respected Mrs Thatcher for the strength in which she took on the country, took on the country's problems, turned us round, made us the most buoyant economy in Europe, forged a rock-hard relationship with our best ally, the United States of America, was strong enough to say to the Argentinians, you are going to get out or we're going to throw you out. I loved everything Mrs Thatcher did, but the minute Mrs Thatcher left office, all her values dissipated. John Major first, wishy-washy in my view, never upheld the values. But then David Cameron, I mean, just an utter disaster. An Eton and Oxford boy who literally said once to a friend who told me, being Prime Minister, that sounds like a good job. I mean, how hard can it be? He had no conception of what being a Prime Minister was all about, you know? And he filled the backbenches with basically Liberal Democrats, in my view, on the Tory side. And they never upheld what I considered to have been the Thatcherite values, which I thought did this country better.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on Kemi Badenoch? You think she could be a bit more...
I'm very impressed with her. Very impressed. But I think that what she's got to do to break through is so enormous. I think there's so far for her to come. I'm very impressed with her in the Commons. I'm impressed with her when she's interviewed on particular issues. She speaks frankly. But the political structure is against her. Now, whether or not Farage and Kemi Badenoch will do, some sort of deal for them. I mean, they've got to, haven't they, really? I mean, when you think about it, can you really, if they have got the love for their country, which they both say they have, can they really shun each other and allow, a collection of left-wing opposition parties to get together? I mean, some of the Greens' policies, I'm reading one this morning. Polanski says, yes, it will be 55 miles an hour on the motorway. Oh, that's great. Let's just slow the country down. You know what I mean? And things like defunding the police, I think, have been discussed in the Green Party and this sort of thing. I mean, it would be reckless to the point of almost... what's the word I'm looking for? Treachery, really, to allow people like that to come in our country. So I do hope they can do something. I also think, I mean, I'm not a political expert to that extent, but I don't know if Reform can hope to get an overall majority. So therefore, wouldn't it be in the interests of both Reform and the Tories to try and forge a unison?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right there. Zach Polanski is an interesting character. I think he has some good ideas and he has some bonkers ones.
I met him once in a TV studio.
Oh, okay.
And I talked to him for about a half an hour. First thing I noticed was he's got terrible teeth, right? And believe it or not, I think that's something politicians have to try and sort out if they want to appear on telly all the time. But then I found him to be a, quite engaging, bright, witty, young man, charismatic. But when I look at the Green policies, I'm sorry, they're all dreadful. Like things like, defunding the military and banning the bomb and all that kind of stuff still seem to be in their locker, and that's just not Phil. I think actually, and again, who am I to predict what's going to happen in the local elections? But I think Green will get somewhere, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
But I think it'll fall off after that. I think this will be the ultimate protest vote of all time, certainly in my lifetime. And then when the electorate have said, right, take that, and they've given the politicians that kick in the face that they want to, I think then a bit of normality might return in the 2.5 years we'll have then to the next election.
Okay.
Unless something happens beforehand, obviously.
Yeah. Pretty sensible, I think. Grooming gangs.
Yeah.
The grooming gang scandal, it's shaken public trust.
Yes.
the local authorities lied to us. We've done investigations with the Daily Express here about Starmer's involvement when he was in charge of the CPS and the things he knew and didn't know and claimed he didn't know. Why do you think it took so long for the authorities to act on this?
Well, I think they're still hedging their bets on it. I mean, I was looking at this last night, knowing we were going to talk about this, and in fairness, there have been some quite serious prosecutions of grooming gangs and very long sentences handed out in the northwest of England. I think Rotherham is obviously the one people, but even in places like Bolton and Newcastle. But when you talk to campaigners, and there are campaigners, quite a lot of female campaigners, they say it's the tip of the iceberg. They say it is such a prevalent problem, particularly in some northern towns, and the police are. Now, the accusation, of course, has always been that police chiefs and local authorities backed away from it because they didn't want to be seen to be oppressing certain members of our society, mostly Muslims, and certainly men from Pakistan, okay? And they always tried to dress it up as community cohesion. And basically what they're saying is we don't want riots to break out if we start getting heavy with the people committing these crimes. But that to me illustrates that the whole thinking process in the police in this country has got to be changed. In 2012, we established something called the Police College in this country, okay? Not sure if you've heard of it, but so that was another quango. And again, 2012, David Cameron was Prime Minister. David Cameron was told when he got in 2010, first thing you got to do, David, is get rid of all those quangos because they're running the country. He started opening more up. That's another thing I don't like about David Cameron, okay? And one of them's the Police College. And you talk to anybody who knows about the Police College, they are a woke institution. And so senior officers are being, in my view, brainwashed by social attitudes which I think are contrary to the general public's desire for what they want the police to do, okay? And I think that was illustrated most graphically in Birmingham. The West Midlands Police Chief, what was his name? Craig Guilford, you remember?
Yeah.
Who got himself involved in the Aston Villa situation. And basically, for your listeners, Craig Guilford was determined that no Israeli fans would come to Birmingham for the Aston Villa game against Maccabi, okay?
Yeah.
The Tel Aviv team. And the information coming out about why this wouldn't happen was extremely confused and at some times not even accurate, that these Maccabi fans had been involved in riots in Europe, which nobody could trace, okay? Now, it then subsequently came out, and this police chief has subsequently resigned, that he allowed a number of people from the Muslim communities to get involved in the discussions about whether Maccabi fans should come to Birmingham. And that, to me, seems to be an example of how the police are giving in to societal trends, giving in to certain pressure groups within society and not independently policing this country. And as I say, as a result, he had to go. And as far as I know, he never had any discussion with Jewish groups in the West Midlands.
No, yeah. What about Sadiq Khan? Because he's been questioned many times about grooming gangs in London.
Yes.
London's the biggest city in the country.
Yes.
Right? One of the biggest in Europe. If we've got places like Rotherham and Telford having grooming gangs, just based off statistically, there's probably some grooming gangs in London. But Khan denied, and thanks to the Daily Express and Zach Garner-Perkins' investigation, we do have a grooming gangs issue in the capital.
Well, I've never seen any evidence of that, and I am not dismissing what you're saying.
Watch our videos.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, right, I'm not an expert on it, but I totally accept your point. 11 million people, within that, there's got to be aspects of the sort of bad behaviour we see in other parts of the country. And by the way, it was Susan, what's her name, wasn't it? The Conservative leader at the London...
Susan Hall.
Susan Hall at the London Assembly.
She's great, Susan Hall.
Yeah, who tried to get the mayor, is it Lord Khan now, is it?
He's soon to be, yeah.
Is it? Yeah, Lord Khan. To comment on this, in which he said, I don't understand the question. He was being very evasive. He was obfuscating what's going on. So I accept what you say. It must be going on. It's just that I haven't, in Rotherham, we've seen examples of poor girls interviewed who, had suffered these terrible crimes years and years ago. I haven't seen anything of that in London. So what I'm saying is, yes, I think it does go on, but I think the police have got to do a lot more work to try and uncover it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about pubs.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me saying, Mike, you seem like the kind of guy who spends a lot of time in a pub.
Not really.
You don't like going to the pub having a few beers?
I love going to the pub, and I've spent years in the pub. I first went to a pub when I was 15, and it was called...
Underage?
Yes, absolutely. Ye Old King's Head in Lowbridge Street in Chester, okay? And funny enough, last year when I was 70, I went back to Chester, and I had the pub for the day, and I bought anybody who wanted to come and have a drink with me on my birthday, come and have a drink.
Oh, that's lovely.
I paid a few grand for all the beers, and that's what they mean to me. I love pubs in this country. There is nothing better than an English country pub. There is nothing better than going down to the pub and seeing people mixing together. And at my age now, when I do go into pubs, I see groups of sort of elderly men and even elderly women who come in for lunch and who sit in the corner and who chat to their friends and all that. And I wonder where they're going to go if the pub's closed down. I mean, only this very morning that we're doing this wonderful podcast, and thank you very much for inviting me on, another report's come out saying that 305 pubs a year are now closing, one a day. And on top of that, restaurants are closing as well because they simply can't afford to go on. I blame Rachel Reeves entirely, right? The pub industry is hospitality, and hospitality is being hit hardest by the increased cost of labour in national insurance charges, the business rates review, and the fact that the minimum wage has been put up, not just put up, but the age differences for the minimum wage now have been collectivised together. Yeah. So it means that where a young person would have an advantage of getting a job in a pub from the age of 18 because they were cheaper to employ, that's now not the case. I can tell you thousands, tens of thousands of jobs have been wiped off the job register because the pubs will not take them. I know Sir Tim Martin very well, who runs Wetherspoons, and I'm in touch with him on a regular basis. And, he's Britain's most popular publican. He knows about running pubs, for 50 years. He built up the Wetherspoons chain. And it's going to kill the pub trade. He only keeps it going by the genius of his ability to trade as a publican. But many of the pubs don't. Many of the pubs are closing down. And we're going to lose them all. And it terrifies me because I think they're the heartbeat of our community. You see, I think the Labour government, they're Cromwellian. They don't seem to like people enjoying themselves. Close down the pubs. Close down betting shops on the high street. They're killing off trail hunting. What's wrong with trail hunting? It's just people riding around on horses. They don't kill foxes anymore. That's been outlawed. They want to see race meetings go on the spurious belief that it's cruel to horses. It's not cruel to horses. Horses in the racing industry are looked after better than any animals in the world, because of the vets that look after them. But it galls me to come back to a subject we started this podcast with, that the price of beer is going up in pubs, the price of labour is going up in pubs, and that's because Rachel Reeves has to take the money to fund this massive welfare bill in this country. So she's putting 10p on my pint of beer so that somebody who's come to this country can stay in a bedroom in a four-star hotel. That is the economics as I see it. She's got to get the money from somewhere to expand the welfare budget. The welfare budget expanded £16 billion in her last two budgets, that she announces in the Commons. And that to me is outrageous, that she's closing down society almost to the point where we won't have any money to spend. There won't be any disposable income because everything's now in taxes. For instance, you want to take your family on holiday in this country, okay? So you want to take them to Butlins for 2 weeks. That's 14 nights. And there's you and your partner and your 2 children, 4 of you. £2 a night on a tourist tax, £8 a night, 8 times 14 is 120 quid. That's another 120 quid on your holiday. I mean, and people like Rachel Reeves say, it's only £2 a night. Not if you've got a family of 4 and you're staying there for 2 weeks. I mean, all they can think about, this Labour government, sorry to keep belting on this.
No, go.
The only political tool they have, in my view, is tax. That's the only political they have. They seem to have two views, and Ronald Reagan was very much of this view, okay? If it's making a profit, tax it. If it's very successful, regulate it. And that's what this Labour government do. There's so much red tape on business now. A mate of mine, and this is no joke, not just a mate of mine, but somebody I needed badly, my accountant, has closed his business because the amount of red tape that was introduced by this government became so onerous, he couldn't be bothered anymore. He's closed it, and of course the people who work for him are not there. And I know loads and loads and loads of other people who are closing down. I know a guy who runs a flower shop, in Surrey, who now has to close a month or 6 weeks before the end of the tax year so as not to earn over £100,000 because if he does, he loses out financially. I mean, this mad system. You get an allowance of £12,800, That starts with it. But then if you earn over £100,000, you lose the £12,800 allowance. You're out of pocket for working hard. And it's this disincentive not to work hard, which I absolutely abhor. You know, the fact that we've got 10 million people in this country economically inactive who have nothing to get up for each day is not only madness of economics, but what's that doing to people's mental health? When you get up in the morning, I want to say, great, today I'm going out, I'm going to see JJ, we're going to do a podcast. That's something to look forward to. I go to the station, I get on the train, At lunchtime when I've finished, I might go and see a mate and join him for a pint in Canary Wharf or something like that,
Yeah.
But these people who don't work, either because they choose not to or because they are disincentivised to, because they get so much out of welfare. I mean, some people live in a house and get up at 6 a.m, go out to work and see their neighbours not getting up till midday and sitting in the garden when they come home and have got more disposable income than the family that work. That's the way our system works. And I just think that is shocking, both for, the well-being of the people of our country, but the well-being of our economy.
Well, final question, Mr. Parry. What do you think is the biggest problem in Britain today?
Well, I think we've covered that on all the subjects that I've spoken about. The biggest problem, in my view, to come would be if Keir Starmer is toppled. Could happen. Because what comes next will be even worse. Angela Rayner is a pure class warrior. No, that's what she's based it on. Whoever replaces Starmer will drift more to the left, even more to the left. And at the moment, they're very left. I mean, can you imagine if Ed Miliband got into a position of power?
Nightmare scenario.
And I mean, actually, funny enough, maybe we should focus on Ed Miliband as the biggest problem in this country. You cannot have a prosperous economy unless you've got cheap power. How do you think the British Empire expanded around the world? Because we had loads of coal underneath the ground here in England. People say the British Empire, it was colonial. No, the British Empire exported lots of good stuff around the world. We were called the workshop of the world because we produced almost everything, just like China does now. We produced everything and sold it around the world, including trains, including technology of that day and that era, including ships. Everything came from this country. That made us prosperous and it helped the rest of the world. We will go downhill so incredibly quickly if Miliband expands his net zero policy, which I think is crazy, even further, because I'm afraid we can't survive. I mean, already the only oil refineries we had in this country have closed down because they can't make it work. But it's even more frightening than that. Alongside the oil refineries, petrochemical companies are now finding it impossible to work in this country because of the same rules and regulations. I spoke to somebody last week who I was researching a subject we did on a TV show, who pointed out to me that if the petrochemical companies go as well, everything goes. Everything we're wearing, clothes, pens, tables, chairs, tyres on your cars, comes from the petrochemical industry. But one thing he said is vitally important is chlorine. We don't apparently now have enough petrochemical installations in this country producing chlorine, and chlorine is what keeps the water clean in this country. The problem is, over the last 20 or 25 years, and this basically I think started round about the Cameron era, was Why bother producing it in this country? We can import it.
Yeah.
Well, that's when, we didn't have maniacs all around the world firing missiles at each other, okay? Mm-hmm. And we are an island nation, and we haven't got a navy to speak of. And yet we now depend on so much coming in from the outside. For Ed Miliband to say, we rely on net zero. Norway are drilling massive amounts of oil and gas out of the North Sea about a mile from the border with us and then selling it to us, right?
Yeah.
We're getting a lot more of it from America. Liquid petroleum, LNG, right? Mm-hmm. Which has to be solidified, brought over here and then vaporised. I mean, it's just madness. Utter madness. We need our own power. We need our own petrochemical industry. We need to be self-sufficient. Ed Miliband goes, we can be self-sufficient. We've got the wind and we've got the sun. No, we haven't, mate. We've got a bit of wind and we've got a bit of sun. But basically, we've got so much gas beneath us, we could be entirely self-sufficient and become a producer again. We don't produce anything. Largely in this country now, we're existing on services. The City of London and things like law and insurance. And that is, in my view, a desperately dangerous situation.
Well, Mike, I'm glad I asked the question.
Okay.
It's a good answer. But Mike Parry, thank you for coming in today. Appreciate your time.
Great to be here. Thank you very much indeed.
Super. I hope you enjoyed that very special episode of the Daily Expresso. Like, share, subscribe, comment, and don't forget to hit that hype button. Bye-bye.